That was arguably the most entertaining game of the season, guys. The tactical level on display from both sides was elite. Now, if you actually watch the game, you know we are either being sarcastic or we somehow tuned into a completely different match. And look, nobody wants to be the person who kills the vibe, especially when the team just picked up a win. But when you really look at last night's result, even though those 3 points are huge, there were still no real signs of progress. Not defensively and not offensively either. And honestly, what made it all feel even worse was the way the game actually ended. But hey, let us not get too negative just yet. Make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let us take a step back and understand what the actual plan was before Spurs got their first red card. We also need to talk about Wirtz and how his subtle genius led to his first assist in the Premier League. So once again, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let us jump straight into it. Like we always do, let us start with the team that Slot decided to put out for this game. Alisson stayed between the posts with no changes at the back once again. Milos Kerkez, Ibrahima Konate, Virgil van Dijk and Connor Bradley made up the backline, keeping things familiar in defence. In midfield, Ryan Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister and Curtis Jones all got the nod, while Dominik Szoboszlai also kept his place despite some reports of him dealing with a bit of discomfort. Up front, it was Florian Wirtz alongside Hugo Ekitike leading the line. Now, the plan for this game was not a bad one at all. At least on paper, in theory, it actually made a lot of sense. But the moment it had to be applied on the pitch, things completely fell apart. What we ended up watching was probably one of the worst first halves of Premier League football this season. Here, you can see Spurs setting up in a 4-4-2 mid-block. The main idea behind it was to crowd the midfield and force us to play wide, which they managed to do for most of the game. Our plan was to keep the ball and slowly try to manipulate their structure in order to open up gaps we could attack. To do this, we relied on 4 key ideas. First, Ekitike stayed high and central for most of the game instead of dropping deep or drifting wide. By doing that, he occupied both Spurs centre-backs and pinned their defensive line in place. Second, there was Wirtz's movement. When he made runs in behind, he pinned the fullback, and when he dropped deeper, he created confusion inside Spurs' midfield line, forcing players to step out of position. Third, McAllister kept coming short to receive the ball, offering a passing option between the lines and helping us progress through the middle. And fourth, Curtis Jones dropped in between our centre-backs during build-up to receive the ball on the first line. This created an overload against Spurs' front two and gave us the option to either circulate possession or try to play through their block. So you might ask, what was the actual aim behind all of this? The idea was to stretch the distance between Spurs' backline and their midfield line, creating space in that area that we could then attack with quick combinations and movements. The problem is we never really did that, and that mainly comes down to 3 key reasons. The first reason was that our backline took far too much time on the ball. Van Dijk, Konate, and even Curtis Jones often took one touch too many, or hesitated when the forward pass was clearly on. Those small delays might not look like much, but at this level, they allow the opposition to reset and get back into shape. The second issue was that Curtis Jones was pretty much the only player consistently trying to play those risky, line-breaking passes. Because of that, our build-up became very predictable. Spurs knew where the threat was coming from and could adjust their pressing and positioning accordingly. The third and biggest problem was the lack of understanding between the players higher up the pitch. After we managed to manipulate Spurs' structure, the timing just was not there. You can see moments where both Wirtz and Hugo drop short at the same time, leaving no one making a run in behind. That completely killed any chance of completing the up, back and through pattern we were clearly trying to use. All of this led to one main outcome. Even when we successfully pulled Spurs out of position, we failed to attack the gaps quickly enough. That gave Frank's side time to recover, close off passing lanes and pick up their marks just before we could make the final move. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what made the first half so underwhelming to say the least. Now, thankfully, Xavi Simons decided it was time to head home and flew into a reckless challenge on Van Dijk, which earned him a straight red card and an early shower. That moment obviously made the game easier for us, as we were able to push Spurs even deeper into their own half. But even with the extra man, we still struggled to turn that control into clear and meaningful chances. And just when you thought Spurs had done enough to help us already, they were not done yet. Their captain Romero then decided to join in and help us out on the scoreboard. While he will probably take most of the blame for our first goal, Florian Wirtz's role in that moment should not be ignored. Because the touch and awareness he showed there was pure genius. You can see the exact moment Wirtz receives the ball here. Look at how much space he has in front of him. With one touch, he could have tried to go straight through on goal and take on the keeper himself. But Wirtz chose not to do that, and there is a very smart reason behind it. The defender was positioned at an angle that would have allowed him to turn it into a foot race, close the space, and force Wirtz wide away from goal. Instead, Wirtz did something much better. He took his first touch straight towards the defender. By doing that, he completely removed the defender's options. In that moment, the defender could no longer jockey, delay, or recover. His only real choice was to step out and try to block a shot. Wirtz froze him by driving directly at him, and at the same time he kept the space open for Isak to attack. That small detail made all the difference. Isak timed his movement perfectly, attacked the space Wirtz protected, and did not disappoint. He calmly slotted the ball into the net with a beautiful finish, and that was Wirtz's first assist in the Premier League, created through pure intelligence rather than pace or power. Unfortunately, that goal came at a cost. It looks like Isak took a heavy knock in the contact, and there are real concerns that it could keep him sidelined for a long time. You could see how much it affected him. He looked absolutely devastated as he went down. We can only hope it is nothing too serious and wish Isak a speedy recovery, because that is the last thing this team needs right now. Then came the second goal, and it all started with a real leap of faith from Hugo. Some people will argue it should have been a foul, others will say it was just physical football. But hey, this is the Premier League. Sometimes those decisions go your way, sometimes they do not. The bigger issue though was what came after. Even at 2-0 up and with an extra man, we still failed to control the game the way we should have. And as you might expect, Spurs took advantage of that. They started putting pressure on us, pushed higher up the pitch, and eventually they found a goal of their own. But somehow it still got worse. Spurs then picked up a second red card, and even against 9 men, we continued to struggle. We could not fully calm the game down or kill it off properly, and that made the final moments far more uncomfortable than they ever should have been. So to wrap this one up, yes, we got the win, and yes, the 3 points are massive at this stage of the season. But performances like this still leave you with more questions than answers. Being a man up, and at one point even 2 men up, should make games calmer, more controlled, and far more comfortable than what we saw. Instead, we made things harder for ourselves and allowed Spurs to stay in a game they really should have been out of much earlier. There were some positives, of course. Wirtz showed again why he is such a special player, not just with his quality on the ball, but with his decision making in key moments. There were also flashes of what this team is trying to build, especially in possession, but flashes are not enough. At this level, consistency and control matter more than anything else. If this team wants to take the next step, these performances need to improve quickly, because better teams will punish these mistakes without hesitation. For now, we take the points, we move on, and we hope this is the kind of game we look back on as a lesson learned rather than a warning ignored. Let us know what you thought of the performance, and we'll see you in the next one.